There we go. And we will go off to, hold on a second.
Everything else you've covered, I had like a smattering of background in. This is like completely going to be new.
Oh. Well, it's yeah, you'll see. This is on the website. That's where this is. On the alephtalks.com website, on the resources tab, you'll see this clearly there. So we have this catch-all topic for mysticism, East and West. And so we're going to deal here with the Book of Enoch. And the source for this is up here. There's this book you can see called The Lost Prophet. So let's just start into this and you'll see what's going on. So the first question is, who in the world was Enoch? And what do we know about him? So on the one hand, he appears to be a wise man whom the angel revealed the secrets of the judgment and the secrets of the natural order. So Enoch knew all of physics and math and chemistry and everything else, how the heavens moved. He apparently also was a priest or a holy person who tried to intercede for the fallen angels. And he was a scribe who presided over the books at the Last Judgment and was given the title the Son of Man, which is a pretty important link, if you think about it, in the Christian tradition. So here we go. Here's the sum total of what we're going to find out about Enoch. We go to Genesis, book 5, verses 18 to 24. When Jared had lived 162 years, remember, these are the patriarchs, okay? And so they all lived 900 years and so forth. So when Jared had lived 162 years, he became the father of Enoch. What are you looking for?
Never mind. Tissue.
But when they talk about years in the Bible like that, what are they actually talking about? I mean, that makes no sense.
Well, we don't know, okay?
Right.
You know, these could be real years. You know, no one knows. We're just taking what this is a translation, remember, of, you know, an ancient text. And Genesis is very different, you know, than the other texts that make up the Torah. So, and this is right at the start. This is book 5. This is, we've hardly made a scratch in the book of Genesis. So, you know, we'll see.
They think that it came from an earlier source than.
Yeah, there's something else deeper here, and this has been handed down. But the thing to keep in mind is Adam was 7 removed from Enoch. So that's how close Enoch is to Adam when you just count noses. Jared, the father of Enoch, lived another 800 years, so he lived to be 962. And he had some other sons and daughters, and then he died. And so when Enoch was 65 years old, he became the father of Methuselah, who was the person that lived the longest of all of the patriarchs. And then Enoch didn't die. After he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked faithfully with God for 300 years. He lived a total of 365 years. And then he walked faithfully with God and was no more because God took him away. So of all the patriarchs, Enoch is different because God took him at this early age. Now we go up to book 6 in Genesis, and we find when human beings began to increase in number on earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God, these angels, saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful and married any of them they chose. And then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. So that's the Lord already has said, you're not going to make it 900 plus years. It's going to be 120 years. The Nephilim were on earth in those days and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of the humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. And the Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on earth. Every inclination of thought of the human heart was only evil all the time. The Lord regretted that he had made human beings on earth. And his heart was deeply troubled. So the Lord said, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race I've created, and with them the animals, the birds, and the creatures that move along the ground, for I regret that I've made them. But Noah, and Noah now is the great-grandson of Enoch. Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Now, we also have here in the book of Jude, Enoch appears saying that he was the seventh from Adam, and it says, according to here, Enoch, also the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints to execute judgment upon all, and to convict all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds which they have ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches which ungodly sinners have spoken against them. So this again, this is in the New Testament. This is not the Torah. And we also find in the Ethiopic Bible, there's a whole section of it which would be called in Christianity the Old Testament, the New Testament, and then the Book of Enoch. So the Book of Enoch is held there on par with these other pieces of scripture.
By whom?
By the Ethiopic or
Okay, sorry.
Coptic sect of Christianity. And this was confirmed when they were discovered in Qumran, these scrolls. Okay. And what they found there was, and behold, he cometh with 10,000s of his saints to execute judgment upon all, to destroy all the ungodly, and to convict all flesh of all the works of their ungodliness, which they have ungodly committed, and of all hard things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. So the things that they found in the Book of Enoch in Ethiopia, and by the way, this was only discovered in 1796 when some Brit went to Ethiopia and discovered that the Ethiopians had this Book of Enoch as part of their Bible. And he brought it back to the British Museum, where it sat there for, I don't know, 50 years before someone bothered to look at it. And they said, what in the world is this? So, things moved a little slower then. Another thing to keep in mind in Enoch in the New Testament now, there is no Book of Enoch in the canon that came through the Council of Nicaea that was there in 325. The Book of Enoch was undoubtedly there because if you look in what is called the New Testament, Enoch, the name, when you just do a global search on Enoch, is cited over 100 times in what became the canon, the official New Testament. So it wasn't that they weren't aware of Enoch or the Book of Enoch, but they looked at the Book of Enoch and they said, this is a little too much we're gonna, leave this out.
Sort of like they left out the Book of Mary and the Book of
Yeah,
Thomas.
all
And,
the Gnostic Gospels, there
right.
were the other, who knows if it's 100. Here it says here, Google search, the word Enoch shows up 107 times. Okay, in the New Testament. So it isn't like, like Jesus of Nazareth was undoubtedly aware of this. He was highly educated. Now, in the first epistle of Peter, again in the New Testament, and the second epistle of Peter, Peter is making reference to some of this material that's in the Book of Enoch. And in the epistle to the Hebrews, Enoch is referred to directly, which may allude to his book. Okay, so there was some sort of Book of Enoch floating around thousands of years ago. And we'll see. Now we have the writings of Enoch, and here, of course, things get squirrely, because, of course, it isn't that there's one Book of Enoch, there's three. There's one Enoch, which was included in the Ethiopian New Testament, and this was written in Coptic, which is one of the reasons why no one knew what was going on, because no one could read Coptic. But it was also found at Qumran in the scrolls there. So it was older than the 3rd century BC. And apparently some early Christian parishes used the Book of Enoch in their get-togethers. But then it got washed out of Western Christianity, gone. That's one Enoch, and that's the one we'll focus on. 2 Enoch is the Secrets of Enoch, which survived only in Old Church Slavonic, which again is another barrier toward what in the world. You have to know Old Church Slavonic. It's like knowing Old Church Latin. And then 3 Enoch is the Jewish mystical version from the 4th or 5th century AD. Okay, and who knows where these things came from? Your guess is as good as mine. So, and again, we're following this book here, which you can get on Amazon. The Book of Enoch is an ancient Hebrew apocalyptic religious text ascribed by tradition to the patriarch Enoch, who was the great-grandfather of Noah. So the Book of Enoch contains unique materials on the origins of demons and Nephilim. Nephilim are apparently giants, entities that are, normally 20 feet tall. So, for example, it's felt that Goliath was actually a Nephilim. He was viewed as a giant by everyone. And there's some angels that fell from heaven. And then there's an explanation of why the Genesis flood was morally necessary. And there's a prophetic exposition of the 1,000-year reign of the Messiah. By the way, there is a lot of archaeological evidence now that in a number of cultures around the earth, there was a major flood maybe 10,000 years ago that washed away just about everything. So the flood wasn't, made up. But the problem is, because so few people survived it, you don't have a lot written down. Now, we have here again these 3 books, Enoch 1, 2, and 3, but none of the books are considered to be scripture by either Judaism or Christianity. In particular, it was probably at the Council of Nicaea that they threw it out.
I think, Jess. Can I have some water, please?
So, hold on a second.
Thank you.
In simple terms, Why do you think they?
So the older sections of one Enoch are estimated to date from about 300 to 200 BC, and the later part probably to 100 BC. So it's been around, in the same time frame as the Torah, as the Old Testament. There are various Aramaic fragments that are found in the Dead Sea Scrolls that suggest that the Jews knew about the Book of Enoch, and and the fact that it's in Genesis that Enoch was talked about there.
At the risk of having a spoiler,
There's also, hold on a second,
can you hear me?
the authors of the New Testament
Doesn't sound like it.
were clearly familiar with some of the content of the
Never mind.
story, because we cited from Jude that Enoch was the seventh from Adam. So there's this family tree showing Adam and Cain and Abel and so forth. And several copies of the early sections of 1 Enoch were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So there really was something there. Now, in the Ethiopian Jewish community called Beta Israel, as well as in the Christian Ethiopian Orthodox community, it's part of their Bible. It just didn't make it a lot of other places. It made it into Ethiopia, and who knows why it died out, didn't go anywhere else. Today, it's only extant in the Ethiopian Ge'ez language. And for this and other reasons, the Ethiopian belief is that the original language of the work was Ge'ez, whereas modern scholars argue, given the time frame we're talking about of 0 AD, it was probably in Aramaic or Hebrew. There wasn't any Ge'ez then, and so forth. And there isn't any Hebrew version that anyone can find. So, when they looked at Qumran, at these fragments of scrolls that they found there, the oldest fragment of the Book of Watchers is dated to 200 BC to 150 BC. And the Book of Watchers shows evidence of multiple stages of composition. So it was probably already there in the 3rd century BC, and then it got doctored by different people. It's no longer possible to claim that the core of the Book of Enoch was composed in the wake of the Maccabean revolt as a reaction to Hellenization. So they had to look for the origins in the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1 Enoch. And in doing this, they came across some sort of Judaism due to Enoch, or Enochian Judaism, which was the writings of a very conservative group whose roots go back to the time of the First Temple. Now, again, who knows if this is true? The people that did all this aren't around anymore. The idea that we saw there in Genesis was that there was evil caused by these fallen angels who came to earth, united with human women. The fallen angels are considered ultimately responsible for the spread of evil and impurity on earth. And one of the things they had was they had children that were giants. They were much bigger than the Nephilim that we're talking about. And these giants apparently went out and just ate everything in sight, and then started to kill people and on and on. And enough said. They said, well, what we have to do is get rid of them, and we'll do this through a flood. We'll wash everything away and just start over. The absence in one Enoch of these formal parallels to the laws and commandments found in the Torah of Moses and references to issues like Shabbat, suggest that this really wasn't of central importance in the book of Enoch. There were just other things they were writing about they thought were much more important, and they were going to cover those. The concept of end of days as a time of judgment takes the place of promised earthly rewards. So that's in the book of Enoch. The rejection of the second temple sacrifices is considered impure. According to the book of Enoch, this is one Enoch we're dealing with here. The Jews, when returned from exile, reared up that tower, the temple, and began to place a table before the tower, but all the bread on it was polluted and not pure. The presentation of heaven in one Enoch is not in terms of the temple in Jerusalem and its priests, but modeling God and his angels on an ancient Near Eastern or Hellenistic court with kings and couriers. And there's a solar calendar that is cited here, as opposed to a lunar calendar that was used in the Second Temple. And that was a very important change, because that was what was used to determine the dates of religious feasts. And then finally, there's this angelic world that involves life after death. So this is in the book of Enoch, stressed. So now we go back to this Essenes, which were the school there at Qumran. And again, these are one of the most mystical sects. Jesus and his cousin John the Baptist were undoubtedly educated there, and they ended up becoming Essene mystics. They learned how to pray, how to meditate, and learned a lot of other things. So in considering the sections of the book of Enoch found in Qumran, it's really not so clear that the texts of Enoch were really there at Qumran. There are pieces of them that they could find, but what was felt to be the movement of the Essenes, the main things about this are the following, which would, let me just scroll down here and we'll see it. There was going to be a Messiah called the Son of Man with divine attributes, who will act directly in the final judgment and sit on a throne of glory. The sinners are usually seen as the wealthy ones, and the just are seen as the oppressed, which we'll also find in the Psalms of Solomon. So the classical Judaism literature is characterized by near silence concerning Enoch, which is strange. It shows up in Genesis, and that's it. The main subjects of the later Merkabah mysticism already occupy a central position in the older esoteric literature, best represented by the Book of Enoch. Well, the Book of Enoch plays an important role in the history of Jewish mysticism. It's probably news to many people that are Jews. Yeah, given what we see going on. When we go through 1 Enoch, you'll see too, there's this incredible description of the throne of God. And there are 10,000 angels, each of which has 10,000 angels. So you're dealing with this incredible panoply of angels surrounding the throne of God. And when we went to the New Testament epistle of Jude here, they were talking about the seventh, Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, "Behold, the Lord come with 10,000 of his saints to execute judgment upon all and convince all who are ungodly among them of all their godless deeds they've godlessly committed, and of all the harsh speeches which godless sinners have spoken against him." So this is, pretty strong stuff. So the Book of Enoch, or 1 Enoch, the one we keep referring to, appears to be influential in molding the New Testament doctrines about the Messiah, the Son of Man, having a kingdom with a Messiah, some notion of demonology, and then resurrection, as well as eschatology. But it's not, it influences and molds these things, but it's not in there explicitly. So the limits are discussed extensively by these other people. There's a Greek text that was known. Remember, this is not in GEs or in the Coptic Ethiopian. This is a Greek text by many church fathers. There were many of them were there at the Council of Nicaea, if you look at these names. But then there's some that are later. So they're clearly aware of this, okay, whatever this is, but there's no meaningful discussion of it. So here we finally have Sir Walter Raleigh in his History of the World, when he's imprisoned in the Tower of London in 1616, asserts that part of the Book of Enoch, which contained the course of the stars, their names and motions, had been discovered in Sheba in the 1st century and was available. And he attributes this information to this source, but that's the only reference to this. No one else can find anything else. And who knows, how did Sir Walter Raleigh find this out? And why did he decide to wait till he was in the Tower of London to talk about this? No idea. Outside of Ethiopia, the text of the Book of Enoch was considered lost when it was confidentially asserted that the book was found in the Ethiopic or Ge'ez language. And this individual, Nicholas Claude Fabry de Périssec, bought a book that was claimed to be identical to the one quoted by the Epistle of Jude and the Church Fathers. And the problem with this is that this other individual, who was some great Ethiopic scholar, claimed that this was a forgery. So much for that. But there's other versions, who knows? There was a Scottish traveler, James Bruce, 1773, returned to Europe from 6 years in Ethiopia and Abyssinia, and had 3 copies. And one of them was given to this British library, Bodleian Library. Actually, wait, there's a Bodleian Library at Yale. I wonder if it's at Yale.
Let's go look.
Yeah.
Have a class trip.
Yeah. Another was in the Royal Library of France, and he kept the third copy. So no one looked at these things until the 19th century. Okay, which shows you, what's going on. And then all of a sudden, there's a notice here of extracts of books with Latin translations of this. And then there's a German translation in 1801. And now we start to get somewhere with some rediscovery. So the first English translation was in 1821. This is supposedly has been lost for the ages, but in fact was discovered at the close of the last century in Ethiopia, no less. Yeah, this is right. This says the Bodleian Library is in Oxford, but there is a Bodleian Library in Yale, and then there's all these revised editions that appeared. So things are starting to cook here, and then finally we get up to this discussion of the Book of Enoch. So the Book of Enoch has 105 chapters. And yet it was considered unreliable because there was a transcription of a single Ethiopic manuscript. Well, I have no idea why it was felt to be unreliable, but anyway, it was. So we go on to 1851. There's some more translations here. Finally, we get up to 1890 to World War I, when there's a translation and a commentary of the Ethiopic text. This was based on 10 additional manuscripts. One wonders how many of these manuscripts are real and whatever, but anyway, there's more and more manuscripts starting to show up. And finally, in the early 1950s, there was an Aramaic fragment of what we call the one Enoch among the Dead Sea Scrolls. And that actually was made public in 1976. I think you can see all the Dead Sea Scrolls online on the internet. I think they've made them available. So we get down here to the present, to 2001, where there's the first volume of a comprehensive commentary on one Enoch. And since the year 2000, there's a whole Enoch seminar and several meetings on the Enoch literature and all kinds of discussions and debates on the stuff of an autonomous tradition that was not the tradition of Moses, and it was in descent in the Second Temple in Jerusalem. So finally, let's get down to the book. The problem we have here is we've been doing everything but talk about the book. The first part of the Book of Enoch describes the fall of the Watchers. These are the angels who fathered the angel-human hybrids, which apparently are called Nephilim. The remainder of this book describes Enoch's revelations and his visits to heaven in the form of travels, visions, and dreams. So there's 5 quite distinct sections. First, there's the Book of Watchers. Then there's the Book of Parables, the astronomical book, which is the Book of Heaven Luminaries, the Book of Dream Visions, or called just the Book of Dreams, and then finally the Epistle of Enoch. So most scholars believe these 5 sections were originally independent works, different dates, different compositions, and themselves a product of much editorial arrangement, and only were later redacted into what is now called one Enoch of the 3 versions we've got. So in the Book of Watchers, here's literally what you'll find in 1 through 36. There's 36 chapters here. 1 through 5 is the parable of Enoch and the future lot of the wicked and righteous. And basically the wicked will get punished and the righteous will triumph. Then chapter 6 through 11, the fall of the angels, the demoralization of mankind, the intercession of the angels on behalf of mankind, and then God pronounces the doom on the angels of this kingdom. 12 to 16 is the dream vision of Enoch, his intercession for Azazel, who's one of these angels, one of the fallen angels, and his announcement of their first and final doom. Then Enoch in 17 through 36 travels through the earth and into hell, Sheol, and also traveled through a portal shaped as a triangle to heaven. Except we don't know where that came from. There was a number of journeys he took. There were these 7 archangels. Enoch, by the way, was accompanied with these 4 archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel. And they're the ones that escorted him and protected him and showed him, first of all, Sheol, or the underworld, and the fire that deals with the luminaries of the heavens, then the 7 mountains in the northwest and the tree of life, and Jerusalem and the mountains, ravines, and streams. There was some snow somewhere in all this. And then there was a journey to the east, a journey to the north, and a journey to the south. And so it goes. And when you read this, you get the impression that there was something going on here, but you can't figure out what it was.
I would say a lot of it is Kabbalistic symbolism. Myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it shows Enoch is a just man whose eyes were opened by God, so that he saw a vision of the Holy One in the heaven, which the sons of God showed, and from them heard everything and knew what he saw. These things that he saw will not come to pass for this generation, but for a generation that is yet to come. So
Wow.
you have God coming to earth on Mount Sinai with his hosts to pass judgment on mankind. The luminaries rise and set in the order and in their own time and never change. You observe and see how in the winter all the trees seem as though they'd weathered and shed their leaves, except for 14 trees, which do not lose their foliage, but retain the old foliage for 2 or 3 years, which is interesting. Apparently Enoch is, I would say, has been exposed to the science that underlies everything and the mathematics. So he understands how all things are ordained by God and take place in his own time, that the sinners shall perish and the great and good shall live on in light, joy, and peace. And all of these works go on from year to year forever. All the tasks which they accomplish for him, their tasks don't change, but according as God hath ordained, so is it done. So, and so it goes. The first section of the book, there's one of these 200 fallen angels, Semi-Azaj, here, and he's telling the other 199 fallen angels to take human wives to beget children. And he said unto them, I fear ye will not indeed agree to do this deed. I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin. And they all answered him and said, let us all swear an oath and all bind ourselves together so as not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. Then they swore together, bound themselves, and were in all 200 went off and carried this out. There's the leaders here, Semiazaz, Araquel, Ramiel, Kobilel, all of these different names here. But the end result is the creation of the Nephilim, or Anakim, is another phrase for giants. So the women became pregnant. They bore great giants whose height was 300 ells. The only problem is, I don't know what an ell is. They consumed all the acquisitions of men. So whatever they asked for, men gave them, and they consumed it. When men could no longer sustain them, then the giants turned against them and started eating the humankind. And then they began to sin against everything: birds, beasts, reptiles, fish. They started to devour one another's flesh and to drink blood. So this is not a good state of affairs. And Azalel taught men to make swords, knives, and shields and breastplates, and taught them metallurgy and how to work these things, and all kinds of colorings that went with this. And so there arose much godlessness and committed fornication. Men were all led astray, became corrupt in their ways. Each of these angels taught different things. One taught enchantments and root cuttings, another how to resolve enchantments, another taught astrology, another how the constellations moved, the knowledge of the weathers, the clouds, the signs of the earth, the signs of the sun, the course of the moon, and so forth. So here we have these four archangels, Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel, and they appeal to God to judge the inhabitants of the world and the fallen angels. And then Uriel is sent by God to tell Noah that there's going to be a flood, a cataclysm, and what he needs to do. So then said the Most High, the Holy and the Great One, go to Noah and tell him in my name, hide thyself, and reveal to him the end is approaching. The whole earth will be destroyed. A deluge is about to come upon the whole earth and will destroy all that is on it. And instruct him that he may escape and his seed may be preserved for the generations of the world. And God furthermore commands Raphael to imprison Azalel, the leader of these 200 angels, bind Azalel hand and foot, cast him into the darkness, make an opening in the desert, and cast him therein, place upon him rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him abide there forever. Cover his face that he may not see the light. And on the day of the great judgment, he shall be cast into the fire. So this is an angel that is apparently immortal. And all that he can do is bind him and bury him under a huge pile of rocks. But he's still there out in the desert somewhere. And on the day of the great judgment, he'll be cast into a fire. And then you still have to heal the earth of this evil that's been done on it by them, and blame it all on Azazel. And then we have Gabriel, who went to the Nephilim and said, proceed against the biters and the reprobates, against the children of fornication, and destroy the children of fornication and the children of the watchers from amongst men, cause them to go forth, and send them one against the other, that they may destroy each other in battle. So Gabriel is one tough cookie. I wouldn't mess with Gabriel. Someone suggests that the translation is a little garbled and it might be something else, but you know, in the translation, it appears to really be correct. Then we come to Michael, the archangel Michael, who was told to bind the fallen angels, go and find Symbolized and his associates, who have united themselves with women to have defiled with them in all their uncleanliness, when their sons have slain one another and they've seen the destruction of their beloved ones, bind them fast for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth till their day of judgment and consummation, till the judgment that is forever and ever is consummated. In those days, they shall be led off into the abyss of fire, into the torment and prison in which they shall be confined forever. And whosoever shall be condemned and destroyed will from henceforth be bound together with them to the ends of all generations. So you could see this might not fit into the canon of the Council of Nicaea. This is pretty tough stuff to read. The Book of Parables is chapters 37 to 71 of the 105 chapters in the Book of Enoch. And the parables appear to be based on the Book of Watchers, but they present a later development of the idea of the final judgment and the destiny of the fallen angels, but also that of the evil kings of earth. And the Book of Parables uses the expression Son of Man, who is also called the Righteous One, the Chosen One, and the Messiah, and sits on the throne of glory in final judgment. That this is the first known use of the Son of Man as a definite title in Jewish writings that occurs in this one Enoch. And the early Christians may have picked up on this and played with it. So it looks like the Book of Parables is really a later addition to all of this stuff. Who knows? The suggestion is that the parables are linked to historic events in 260 to 270 AD. But again, we don't know. But that means it could have been written by a Jewish Christian to enhance Christian beliefs. And they did this using Enoch's name, which was very authoritative. So forth. So the Book of Parables, again, has these things. There's a first parable, the coming judgment of the wicked, the four archangels we talked about briefly, and so it goes. And then there's a whole set of things coming through here, down through the second and third parable, and finally we get to the end of all this. And there are two earlier visions of Enoch that close this thing out. So
They go up a little bit. They refer to Satans in the plural.
where?
Here, number 69, the names and functions of the fallen angels and Satans.
Right.
Why, can you hear me?
Yeah, you can read this translation. It's just that it's very hard to figure out what in the world is going on here.
Why did you choose
There's a whole book that's basically astronomical. The movement of the heavenly bodies in the firmament as it was revealed to Enoch, guided by Uriel through heaven. So there's a solar calendar here, which suggests that the sun is at the center of the solar system. which is one reason why he chose the solar calendar as opposed to a lunar calendar.
In part,
He ended up with
part.
4 seasons of 91 days each,
Ah,
and that meant they had 364 days.
Wow.
He can't hear either one of us, Bruce. I'm giving up.
But
yeah.
the problem is you're 1 day short. It's actually 364, I don't know, 365 and a quarter. It depends. That's why every 4 years we add 1 day.
Which was, here we are today.
Yeah. That is today. And so this led to 3 equal months of 30 days, plus an extra day at the end of the 3rd month. That meant that the whole year was exactly 52 weeks.
I always thought this was a Roman convention much later, because the Hebrew calendar is 13 months of 28 days, which makes sense.
Right.
As any woman can tell you, the monthly cycle is 28 days. There are 13 complete revolutions of the moon through the
Mm-hmm.
ecliptic cycle, circle for every solar cycle.
Right.
So there are 13 months. Moon being the root word of the word
Right.
month.
Right.
And that gets you a lot closer than 360 degrees, and our concept of a degree being 360 is from our concept of a day or a dog.
Right. No.
So 13 times 28 is a lot closer than
Right.
30 times.
The thing
12.
to keep in mind is that Uriel is taking Enoch out to see the sun and to see the moon. He left Earth and he's out seeing these things.
Hmm.
And this astronomical book here goes down to the last thing is chapter 82, where he's got to reconcile these days. He's short 1 day in trying to get things to work out. So the final one is the dream visions, which contains a vision of the history of Israel, down to what most people have interpreted as the Maccabean revolt, dated to around 163 to 142 BC. And what Enoch saw in this dream vision was the founding of a kingdom headed up by the Messiah, and the punishment of the fallen angels, the archangels leading the punishment, this deluge, and that Noah survived, and then the death of Noah to the Exodus. So it goes. So here's a bunch of things which are highly granular, trying to get into why they think this is what it is, describing, for example, Alexander the Great to the Greco-Roman Syrian domination and so forth. So this is a very different time frame. The Book of Enoch is an allegorical account with the second dream vision of the history of Israel. It uses animals to represent human beings, and human beings to represent angels, which is interesting. And so they go through a whole discussion here. In part because I think these are things that people could identify with, and that makes the story more compelling. Bruce, you've got something up here. What does
Yeah,
it say? I can't hear you.
yeah, I know.
Did we lose you on the sound?
Yeah,
Wait. We say something, Bruce.
yeah,
Oh, no, yeah, we lost you. Okay.
Did you want to say something?
well, Patty and I are trying to say something, but you can't hear us.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, we have a bad connection on the speakers. I'm sorry.
I wanted to take a step back and ask you in a bit, because this is just, it's a lot. What is the reason that you chose the Book of Enoch and these parables? Like, what is the main reason you wanted to talk about this?
It's because it was clearly known to the early Christians, to Jesus of Nazareth. It was recited repeatedly in the New Testament, cited, and yet it's dropped completely by the Council of Nicaea as part of the official canon.
So that's my question really, is like, why do you think it was dropped? Why is it important? Like, what is it that's so controversial about it or
Well,
so important about it?
well, partly it's describing this person, Enoch, who shows up in Genesis and does not die. It says God took him when he was 360 years old. He was taken by God.
Mm-hmm.
That by itself is unusual. Everyone else, all the other patriarchs die,
Yeah.
900 years old. Enoch does not die. And Enoch is there with, remember, he's the great grandfather of Noah. And so he's working with God and says it's time to have the flood occur. This is not a minor thing, saying we're going to wash everything away. Then here's a description of where Enoch went with these different angels. He took a tour of the sun and the moon and how the heavens worked. You know, he was involved with all of these visions of how Israel would evolve over time, and that he's going to be there there'll be a final judgment that will be there with the Messiah, a son of God, and so forth. So these are all things that, how to say it, the things that made the short list at the Council of Nicaea. Remember, most people couldn't read or write. So what made the cut was stories, parables that would be compelling, that would get across lessons. Look at what we're talking about here. These are beyond parables. These are, you know, like people are scratching heads going, what in the world is this? Okay. You can't really focus things or have a canon if you tried to include this Book of Enoch. So I can understand why they left it out. Well, what I don't understand is why it wasn't kept in some you know, mystical Christian Judeo vault someplace where the Essenes would go study it or whoever. But it just dropped from mention. It's just lost completely, other than for whatever reason the Ethiopians liked it. I have no idea why they liked it, but they kept it for the whole time.
I've read that if you want to learn more about traditional Judaism, look at the Ethiopian traditions, because they're more original. You know, they preserved a lot that kind of got dropped. You know, they were the lost tribe, and
Yeah,
they didn't, you know, we could say evolve or devolve along the same lines that all the others over there in the Middle East did. They kept things more pure and more traditional.
I mean, do you feel like it was dropped because it was, you know, that he was there in cahoots with God and wiped out the world? It's because, and it was so critical of the people?
yeah, that there was evil there, that these fallen angels were taking, you know, having their progeny be these giants that were destroying everything in sight. And you know, and Enoch was involved in destroying them. The flood occurred in part to just get rid of them. They couldn't figure out what else to do. You know, you can, if you look at this, you can see that what Enoch is doing is probably as important as what Jesus of Nazareth did. It's just that he isn't the Messiah. He's just, you know, the person who's running around, you know, looking at this and looking at that and saying, we've got to fix this, we've got to fix that. And it's only been recently with, you know, since World War II with the Dead Sea Scrolls, so we've been able to get independent confirmation from the scrolls that yeah, what was there in the Ethiopian Coptic Bible is indeed,
It's real.
it was really there, that it wasn't somebody that just cooked it up one night, you know, after a few, you know, slugs of wine.
It's probably a lot more authentic than what's come down to
Yeah,
us, you know, which has been so.
yeah, but and you could see that there could be early Christian sects after Jesus was crucified that would have picked up on this and said, well, why don't we, you know, discuss this every week as part of our get-togethers, okay? But it would be a very different thing than, you know, for example, what the epistles of Paul were. Okay, that was one of the problems why the Council of Nicaea came about, was there were several hundred of these parishes throughout the Mediterranean, and they were all doing different things. There was evidence that some of them were, you know, basically spiking the wine with psychedelic mushrooms. So, you know, you get a real jolt when you have communion. You know, you
see God.
yeah. I mean, no, everything was on the table then, and so this is one of these things. So anyway, it is all discussed in this book. I'm just gonna you know, the fallen angels themselves come up in other places and so
who
forth.
knows what was actually going on? You know, I mean, for all we know, they were aliens that were, you know, were that huge, walking among us, and
Yeah,
I don't know. It's just
yeah, we don't know, but it's part of, you know, trying to be complete and say this apparently was part of the Judeo-Christian tradition, but for whatever reason, you know, it's been ignored.
it's been expunged.
Yeah. So now let's try something really different to give you the flavor of which is what is going on here, which is these are the Eleusinian Mysteries.
I think that, you know, there is thinking, not only my idea, that a lot of that made its way into the Roman Catholic Church as the Mass. You know, that it is a lot of the symbolism is about this kind of symbolic death and rebirth that we associate, with Easter, but it's every day. It's
Sure,
not just the seasons, it's
right.
the sun rising every morning. But specifically the Eleusinian mysteries are about the planting of seeds in the earth.
Yeah,
And the human seed in the mother, which I think at first they thought the male of the species had nothing to do with it. And then they thought that the woman was just the vessel, holding the seed from the male. But that's what is being represented in the planting of the corn, and Persephone as the Kore, the Kore, and the resurrection of the seed, it splits open. That's the death of the seed, just like the caterpillar, dies in the cocoon and is reborn as a butterfly. And that's they think what part of the Eleusinian mysteries were enacting, the mystery of agriculture was high magic. And how do you make it through the winter? You have to know when to plant and when to harvest and things like that, from the heavenly signs and the cycles. They had to know when the equinox was happening, not just from the weather. And when to, as I said, when to plant and when to harvest, and all of that was esoteric priestly knowledge, that was partly preserved in these rituals. And that was what the subtext of all of the religious texts was these mysteries about life and death and rebirth.
One of the things that I forgot to mention was after the Council of Nicaea in 325, that the Catholic Church decided to eradicate all of its competition. So they started going out over the next 100 years and destroying all of the temples to different Greek and Roman gods or other entities, Zoroaster and so forth in the Middle East. And in particular, in 392,
The library.
they destroyed the library in Alexandria. Now, the library in Alexandria could very well have had the Book of Enoch. And there's intimations that Enoch, in fact, wrote hundreds of books trying to describe in greater detail what he learned about how the stars moved and so forth. So basic physics 101, all of which, of course, was destroyed in 392 AD. So the Eleusinian mysteries are really at the mystic side of the Greek religion, but they're not caught up with all of these squabbles between the Greek gods, male and female, and so forth, over who did what to who when. It's as you'll see, it's something that is truly mystical.
And it's also who are the people at Princeton who wrote the book?
At Princeton, there's this woman at Princeton. Is that what you mean?
They were a pair. They were German and Italian, and they wrote, oh, damn it. Hamlet's Mill.
Oh, they were at MIT.
That's what I meant.
Princeton, MIT, what's the
No.
difference? Yeah, anyway.
I meant MIT. We've just been talking about Princeton a lot this week. No, but that the myths were actually mnemonic devices to remember these patterns of the planets and other things, and
Yeah.
the symbolism
I
what
understand.
of the natural facts that are represented in the myth symbolically.
Right.
There, I said it. So,
Right.
and that's what Hamlet's Mill was about, was really like the cycles of Jupiter and Saturn and the meta cycles. And you know, the human scale is more the annual cycle, but it could be, you know, the Saturn cycle. It forms a square to itself every 7 years. That's why 7 years is so significant in human terms.
The thing to keep in mind here is, on the one hand, these Eleusinian mysteries probably started in Athens as a ceremony there, but the Greeks had colonies all around the Mediterranean. So, you know, on the southern coast of France, over in Italy, on Spain, on the Iberian Peninsula, Northern Africa. So the Eleusinian mysteries were celebrated at all of these different places once a year, but it was for a very select few that made the short list that were able to go do this. Also, the Vatican apparently has a whole pile of stuff on this. And there's lots of books, but the main thing to keep in mind is it does appear to involve some sort of psychedelic trip. And this is really a life-changing event for anybody that went there. They've never run into anything like this. And, you know, and so it goes.
It's like a deliberately choreographed hallucination.
Right. So, every year there was the cult of Demeter and Persephone, based in this sanctuary of Eleusis. That's I figured out that I had misspelled Eleusinian. And these are the most famous, and yet when you go through and do these rites, you have to pledge secrecy. You can't tell people what happened, okay? So it started off as an old agrarian cult of some sort, maybe from Mycenae, but
That would be the age of Taurus, by the way.
right. And the myths are dealing with this. They're built around the myth of the abduction of Persephone from her mother Demeter by the king of the underworld, Hades. So here we have Persephone is lost to Demeter. Then Demeter goes searching, and then Persephone arises. There's an ascent or rebirth and reunion with her mother. And this is a cycle that occurs every year. You know, when in the spring, when there's but the part of the problem in this thing, I believe, as we'll see here, is that Persephone could only spend like 9 months with her mother, and she had to spend 3 months in Hades as a result of what was going on here.
She ate 7 seeds or something.
Right. No one knows what the rites and ceremonies were, because you had to pledge secrecy. The rebirth of Persephone symbolized the eternity of life from generation to generation, and it also suggested there'd be a reward in the afterlife. There are many paintings and pieces of pottery that depict various aspects of the mysteries. So apparently that was okay to go do that. You just couldn't write it down. You could do paintings and paint on pottery. And they involve visions and conjuring of an afterlife. And that is what led to the longevity of the Eleusinian Mysteries. Or to put it differently, they really weren't into mushrooms. And so when you get hit with this heavy duty dose of mushrooms, it is a life-changing experience.
It's a psychological death and rebirth.
Let's see. Yeah, Demeter's daughter Persephone was assigned the task of painting all the flowers on the earth. And while she was doing this, she didn't finish it. Hades showed up, grabbed her, and took her to the underworld. Demeter searched high and low for her daughter, and in an effort to coerce Zeus to allow the return of her daughter, she caused a terrible drought in which people suffered and starved, depriving the gods of sacrifice and worship. So as a result of this, Zeus relented and allowed Persephone to return to her mother. Now, Demeter traveled long distances and had many minor adventures along the way, one of which is where she taught the secrets of agriculture to Triptolemus. And finally, Demeter is reunited with her daughter, and the earth returns to its former greenness and prosperity in its spring. Now, Zeus was pressed by the cries of the hungry people and forced Hades to return Persephone. However, it was a rule of the fates that whoever consumed food or drink in the underworld was doomed to spend eternity there. And unfortunately for Persephone, that's what she did. Hades tricked Persephone into eating the pomegranate seeds, either 4 or 6, which forced her to return to the underworld for some months each year, apparently 1 month for each seed. And she lived above the ground with her mother for the rest of the year. So that's the problem with when you don't have any harvest. There's nothing to cultivate. But Demeter became very joyful and cared for the earth when Persephone returned to her. So with that as a background, we have the temple at Eleusinian in Attica, and some practices appear to be influenced by this, but we don't know. But one line of thought has been that the mysteries were intended to elevate man above the human sphere into the divine and to assure his redemption by making him a god and conferring immortality upon him. Which, with you put down a few mushrooms, you're probably there. The scholars argued that the Eleusinian cult was a continuation of the Minoan cult. Demeter was a poppy goddess who brought the poppy from Crete to Eleusis. And the result of this, you start to see how they get into psychedelics as a result. There's a cave in Crete where there's an annual birth of a divine child. So there's things related to this that are occurring elsewhere in the Mediterranean.
And you can see the precursors to Christianity.
Yeah. And at Eleusis, you end up with just capturing these inscriptions that were there. There are 3 phases again: the descent, the search and the ascent, and the different emotions that went with them. And so we get up to the feast day that the Greeks went through. They'd fill two special vessels. One was poured out toward the west, the other toward the east. And the people looked both to the sky and to the earth and shouted in a magical rhyme, reign and conceive. So in a ritual, a child was initiated from the hearth, the divine fire. And the name Pais for the child appears in Mycenaean inscriptions, and it was the ritual of the divine child that we're dealing with here. The goddess of nature we ran into here, with the high point of the celebration being ear of grain that was cut in silence to represent the force of new life. So just capturing the symbolism of it's spring and there's a rebirth. There originally, at the idea of immortality did not exist in the mysteries at the beginning, but the initiated believed that they would have a better fate in the underworld. Death remained reality, but at the same time, a new beginning, like the plant, which grows from the buried seed. And so it goes. Once a year, you had the greater mysteries. Every 4th years, there was a really big blowout, a special splendor. So the lesser mysteries were held in February, and the only way to really get into the greater mysteries was to do it in September of the following year, if that was what was going on. And this happened for about 2,000 years. This is not a minor thing. In the Homeric hymn to Demeter, the king is said to have been one of the first people to learn the secret rites and mysteries of her cult. He was one of the original priests and ended up learning agriculture, everyone from Demeter. And so it goes. The main thing to keep in mind here is you had to be free from blood guilt. You could never do this if you had committed murder. Also, you couldn't be a barbarian. And barbarian means you couldn't speak Greek. Okay, so women and slaves, as well as men, went through the Eleusinian Mysteries, went through this initiation.
I think it might have had to do with the knowledge that males impregnated females, that was
Yeah.
not known before then, or forbidden knowledge before then. And that sex had to do with it. They weren't really sure what the connection was before.
Right.
So that was a powerful piece of knowledge to have.
Absolutely. There's 4 categories of people involved in the Eleusinian Mysteries. There's the priests, the priestesses, and their hierophants.
Which are like popes.
So that's number 1. There's the initiates, who are undergoing the ceremony for the first time. There's all the others who had already participated at least once. And finally, there were those who had attained apoptia, which in English is translated as contemplation. So they learned the secrets of the greatest mysteries of Demeter. So by contemplation, it sounds to me like they're talking about meditation, and by doing so that they learned a lot. And this was only a select few.
Apparently it was a guarded secret to even that, planting seeds could lead to deliberate crops, that you could have crops. You didn't have to just find what was already growing, by the luck of the draw, but that you could, and if you had an ear of corn in our hemisphere and plant it with a fish, it has a much better chance of growing the following spring. Things like that was shamanic knowledge that was closely guarded because it meant life and death.
Now, here we have, this was such a big deal that they ended up with 6 categories of priests. First, they had the high male priest, which you had to inherit this through your family. Then there was a high priestess of Demeter, and this again had to be inherited. So you had a male high priest and a female high priestess. Then you had men serving as torchbearers, which was just a notch below being the high priest, and priestesses who assisted the torchbearers. And again, this was inherited. Then you had 2 married priestesses, one serving Demeter and the other Persephone. And finally, you had a group of priestesses who lived a life secluded from men. So if you look at this list, it looks like there's a lot of women. They're on equal footing with the men participating, and so it goes. The lesser mysteries, this is done every year. But again, it's all secret. So according to Plato, the ultimate design of the mysteries was to lead us back to the principles from which we descended, a perfect enjoyment of intellectual or spiritual good. And this occurred in February, maybe March. They would sacrifice a piglet to Demeter and Persephone, purify themselves in the river Ilissos, and then they were deemed misdai or initiates worthy of witnessing the greater mysteries. So this is the lesser mysteries. The greater mysteries took place in late summer, in September or October, and these lasted 10 days. And so this is really a big deal where, like there's a parade out of Athens that they went over to this place, and hundreds of people in this parade, and they're going to celebrate the greater Eleusinian Mysteries. They declared the start of the mysteries. The people came by sea. People washed themselves in the sea. There was a festival for Asclepios that was here. So it was a festival within a festival. And then there was this procession that began at this cemetery in Athens. And the people walked to Eleusis along the sacred way, swinging branches called bakoi. Along the way, they shouted obscenities in commemoration of Baubo, an old woman who, by cracking dirty jokes, had made Demeter smile as she mourned the loss of her daughter. Go figure. And the procession then shouted Lak or Lake, possibly an epithet for Dionysus or Iacchus, the son of Persephone or Demeter. Once they reached Eleusis, there was an all-night vigil, perhaps commemorating Demeter's search for Persephone. And here we go. The initiates had a special drink, Kykeon, of barley and pennyroyal. This has led to speculation around its chemicals having psychotropic effects, from ergo, which is a fungus that grows on barley, containing psychedelic alkaloid similar to LSD. Discovery of fragments of ergo in a temple dedicated to the two Eleusinian goddesses provided legitimacy for this theory. The ergo fragments were found inside a vase and within the dental calculus of a 25-year-old man who probably, freaked out and jumped off the cliff, having this kickaboo joy juice. He then we then end up with the next day going into this great hall, which only the hierophants could enter, where the sacred objects were stored. There were things done in a dramatic reenactment of the Demeter Persephone myth. There were things shown and displayed as sacred objects. And then there were things said, which are commentaries. And these things all together are the unrepeatables. The penalty for divulging them was death. So we don't know anything about these. And then as to the climax, some hold that the priests were the ones to reveal the visions of the holy night, consisting of a fire that represents the possibility of life after death. Others hold this is insufficient to account for the power and longevity of the mysteries, and the experience must have been internal and mediated by a powerful psychoactive ingredient contained in Kykeon. Then there was an all-night feast accompanied by dancing and merriment. The dances took place in this field, rumored to be the first spot where grain grew. There was a sacrifice of a bull late that night or early the next morning. And then they honored the dead by pouring libations from special vessels. And then everything ended and they walked back to Athens. So, they've been gone for a week. This is not a minor thing, doing this every 4 years. The power of this, everyone thinks, is due to the Kykeon, the psychedelic agent, and that this was relatively common in Greece and the ancient world. That the initiates were sensitized by fasting, and they've been propelled by the effects of this really powerful potion into mind states with profound spiritual and intellectual ramifications. So, just as an example, if you ever read Hunter Thompson's book, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, he spends 48 hours in Las Vegas, and he spends 24 hours covering a motorcycle race. He then leaves Las Vegas, and the cops pull him over outside of Las Vegas because he's driving like a complete maniac because he's on LSD. So the cops tell him, you really shouldn't be doing this. So he turns around and he goes back to the same hotel he was in. And now, instead of there being a motorcycle race there, it's a police convention where they're dealing with how to deal with psychedelic drugs like LSD. So Hunter Thompson registers as part of the press. And while he's registering, he's complaining about how they have purple alligators running around in the lobby of the hotel next to the registration desk. Of course, he's the only one that can see these. And you could imagine what he did in covering this. The point is that this really was a life-changing event for a lot of these people. This Athenian aristocrat Alcibiades was condemned partly because he he had his Eleusinian mystery in a private house. You
I
know,
think there was a lot of sex involved,
oh yeah,
and there was, like a ritual loss of virginity with, a lot of it was heterosexual, and the young boys to the priestess and the young virgin girls to the high priest. And I think that's where, unfortunately, a lot of the tradition of the clergy sex abuse comes from. It was part of their training,
right.
but it was in a different context when it was in the open, and it was formal. It was what everybody did. But I think it's just kind of still ingrained in them, and they can't,
Oh,
see the difference. But at some level, they feel like, well, this is my duty.
yeah. The speculation here is that really agriculture, it was really driven by beer, not food. People enjoyed getting high from alcohol or finding these mushrooms there. The Göbekli Tepe site that's in southeastern Turkey, that's 10,000 years ago, was when it was buried. Okay, so it's far older than the pyramids. That there's no evidence that there was really any village there, but there was a lot of bones they discovered. From, for example, if they had a bonfire and they cooked a cow or a bull, that sort of thing. And there's a lot of evidence of beer or hallucinogenic beverages that were there, but there wasn't anything other than that. Okay, it was really the spiritual experience was getting high on whatever it was. The West called it Kykeon, the East called it Soma. In the Americas, there was mushrooms and ayahuasca. The Incas, over in Brazil, in the Amazon basin, ayahuasca is heavy duty stuff, and so it goes. They spread throughout the entire Mediterranean because that's where the Greek colonies were. And a lot of it, again, is this rebirth of having spring come out. So even the pomegranate seed of Persephone could have pointed to something like the apple of Adam and Eve. And so that's it. This is the other extreme of things, the Eleusinian Mysteries. We have a few other things, odds and ends that we could run through, but I thought we would do some other things going forward in time. We're still tracking the syllabus. So we basically finished, section 4. And we'd be going off now and doing things related to Jung and synchronicity with Jung and Pauli. And so that'll be where we start to going forward in time.
It's a wonderful book if you have a chance to crack it open.
Yeah, Adam and Archetype.
ATOM, Adam. And
well, that was really interesting. I was out in Oregon a week ago, and my cousin is a psychologist and did a lot of work with families, but she's been living out in the West near the tribal lands for a long time, and she has been trained to take people on these journeys with, it's legal now in certain places to do this work. And she was trained by the shamans in the with the tribes. And she does it, individually, and it's pretty amazing.
And they're using, peyote or mushrooms.
I know well, you know what, there's several different things, but mushrooms are one, but ayahuasca is another one that some people use. But she talks a lot about the ancestors, and she said people have really powerful experiences and enlightening moments.
Right.
Things just become clear.
Yeah, well, Plato went to the Eleusinian Mysteries, and Plato said it was a life-changing event for him.
I wonder if it doesn't, lift some kind of veil that that the rest of us have. That gives you just, true vision, true, insight into the nature of things.
Which would explain why the powers that be over time, like, didn't, this stuff didn't make it into the canon kind of thing, because
Right.
they wanted to control. That was a big part of, I would imagine, spreading different religions around the world. You had to really keep tight control on people.
And you had to go through them. You had to go through.
Right, yeah. You couldn't have a direct revelation and a
that.
direct experience. You needed to have the liturgy and the priests and
they were controlling it all. And
Yeah, but see, that's what's not clear is probably what happened with Jesus of Nazareth was his assistant, Mary of Magdalene, probably wrote up a lot of this stuff. She appears to be very competent. And so there was this book that has been called The Path of Love that was the basis for having discussions every week, typically led by the women priests, not the men.
Mhm.
And all of this was lost when in the Council of Nicaea.
I think Eve was initiating Adam in the Garden of Eden. I think that's what was going on. The serpent, and the whole, it's Kundalini is the serpent. That's what it's about. That's what, sex is really about. And it is where life comes from, it's pretty important. That's pretty potent. And I think that she initiated him, and that's the taboo, it's because it's so potent, it's because it's so important, it's the most significant thing of all.
Well, all that Demeter and Persephone and all of that, I'm familiar with from sort of the, women's spirituality, the calendar of the year,
Right.
it was all just very natural.
Mhm.
And it's just about life and being close to nature. And they're just parables and ways of thinking about it, but it's the old pagan rites, right? They were trying to get rid of them,
Right.
rename them in a Christian way, and kind of make sure that God was a step above the goddess. And that's how it seems to me.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, but there's indications, again, that the early Christian churches there in the Mediterranean, several of them spiked the communion wine with mushrooms.
Yeah.
And, that got people coming back every week.
That's really funny.
And they knew all this. They knew the astronomical cycles. They knew the astrology, and they made it forbidden because it was for them. Those vaults under the Vatican are full of this kind of knowledge.
Yeah, the real story. It's
It's
all,
also full of a lot of gold that they probably accumulated in part by not allowing other people to know stuff.
Right,
oh yeah, yeah,
right.
You know, it's just you learn, the more you learn, the harder it is to kind of accept some of the basics of organized religion, but then what it did as far as glorifying and music and culture and art, and there's a lot of good things that came out of that kind of balance off the we're going to control everything aspect.
Right, right.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you have to ask, does it really balance?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little off balance, but anyway, that was really interesting. Thank you.
Oh, glad you liked it.
It's not your run of the mill
I
adult faith formation class.
wish I had my cousin here.
Oh,
You're welcome to come out for a visit sometime. And
you can look at it on YouTube.
Well, she can,
She,
we can beam her in.
Yeah.
no, I mean, if you went out with her, she'd put you through one of these rituals. You might enjoy it.
sure.
Mm,
Would she like to give a guest class?
Yeah, that's what I was getting at.
yeah, maybe.
Yeah, we'd be glad to have her, talk about shamanism. That's a perfectly good thing to do.
I'll ask her.
Yeah.
And I think you hit it on the head there, Patty, we were saying. These other traditions are a lot more egalitarian. The experience is available to anybody who wants it. You don't have to go through this hierarchy and through this, this other direct connection to the transcendent. You can transcend, you can have your own, mind-blowing initiation. If it isn't enlightenment, it's some kind of direct experience. And that's what they don't want. They want us to have to go through their channels, so to speak.
And at the end of the day, winner take all. Who's in charge?
Well,
Maybe that's changing. Maybe it does seem that we're going through a pretty huge shift.
yeah, no, that's true. The thing to ask your cousin, the 500 plus nations that are there, none of them in their language have the notion of the word property.
Mm.
There isn't any ownership of property. The tribe has its area that it lives in, farms in, hunts in.
They also maintained it, they would do periodic burns that it's good for a forest to clear out the undergrowth, then
Yeah.
the mature trees aren't strangled, by the undergrowth. And they did that in harmony with nature. They weren't subduing it and, turning it all into fields and parking lots. But it wasn't just wild either. I was surprised by that. I didn't know that they were really, what's the word? Not shepherds, but tending.
Guardians or custodians.
More like
Yeah.
caring for it. There's a word for
Right.
that. And Adam, that's what Adam was supposed to do, what is it? I drive myself crazy with this.
Eh,
It's like shepherd, but they tended it
Yeah.
anyway. So, we've just completely lost that notion, and we just have this notion of dominion, dominance.
Right.
But even here with the Eleusinian Mysteries, you can see, there's a group of select people that meditate.
Mm.
that have found something special there. You know, we just you know, it's a common theme that occurs again and again. So with that, we will wrap things up, and
See you next week. Good night. Thanks.
any night.
Bye, Bruce.
Bye-bye.
Same bad time, same bad.